Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Jewish Pedagogy Symposium. It's so nice to be here with you. Erev Chag, Rosh Hashanah, in that time between the old year and the new year. Welcome to all the people from the West Coast, the East Coast, Israel, Warsaw, and keep them coming. My name is Molly Andron, and I work at M Squared, and I had the privilege, along with founder of M Squared, Shuki Taylor, to steward and facilitate this inaugural cohort of the Jewish Pedagogy Circle. On one of the opening slides that was very quick, but I hope you had a moment to respond, we asked you to name 3 words that reflect your sentiment of being here today. And
Molly, you're muted.
Was I muted that whole time?
No.
Okay. We lean in with, humility and respect for technology. So we asked you to share 3 words of how you're feeling being here, and what were some words that came up. And some of you had the time to respond. What brought you to this symposium? If you didn't have a chance to respond, I invite you to share in the chat what brought you to the Jewish Pedagogy Symposium here today. Just take a minute to look at these words. We are curious, we are connected, we are yearning for community, we are inspired. We love Kiva and M Squared. We feel connected. Judaism daughter. I put that in here because my father is here today. And I just want to say that we are really honored to have you join us for this afternoon, night, evening, morning of learning and celebrating the work of these 12 outstanding fellows. You'll have a chance to experience part of their educational practices and learn about their pedagogy and their process of discovery throughout the fellowship. And without any further ado, I turn to Shira Hecht-Kohler and Jake Marmer to get us a bit more grounded into this virtual space.
Hey, everybody. What a pleasure to kick this off. Thank you, everybody at M Squared. Thank you, everybody who's here. Shira and I we'll kick this off as partly also as a little preview for the session that we're doing just a little bit later. Can everybody see me and hear me? Yes, great. So Molly asked me to get this started with a poem, and when a poet is asked to read a poem, the traditional answer that's been given for many centuries is, I'm going to read you 2. So I don't want to veer too far from the tradition. I'll read 1, but in 2 variations. It's a poem by a Jewish poet sage, Samuel Menashe, who was born on the Lower East Side to a Yiddish-speaking family. And as he told me, he became a poet after surviving the infamous Battle of the Bulge as a US soldier. And he wrote this poem as a young man and then revised it, changing a single word in the last decade of his life. It goes like this, and this poem is in part, both variations are in part maybe an intention for this session today. It goes like this. Always when I was a boy.
I'll order a platter, which I'll do soon.
Wow, I'll restart there, but in the Talmudic fashion, we have the narrative and the commentary. Okay. Always when I was a boy, I lost things. I am still forgetful, yet I dare say all will be lost one day. So he wrote this poem as a young man, and then many years later, he revised it. And it goes like this, changing again, just 1 word. Always when I was a boy, I lost things. I am still forgetful, yet I dare say all will be found one day. And what I hold sacred about this piece is the act of the revision that takes a poem from ironic and skeptical into almost mystical idea of all being found one day, mystically hopeful idea. What I hold sacred is that the text remains open and transforms at a single touch. What I hold sacred is we're not talking about losing keys here, but losing something like learning. You know, we learn so much and we forget so much. Maybe none of the learning that we ever do is really lost, and we bring it to every next time that we learn, whether we're aware of it or not. And my intention and hope for this session is that everybody who's here comes and learns something, finds something that they wish to learn, and also that they find some of this learning later. As Samuel said, one day when it's just the right time that you find this learning, and it is just what you need. Thank you. Passing this over to Shira.
Wow, Jake, thank you for opening with that beautiful intention, with that beautiful poem. And thank you everyone for being here today. I'm Shira Hechtkohler, and it's really a delight to be learning, creating together with everyone today. I would like in the next few minutes to really build on Jake's opening, his intention, and sanctify our space together by offering you just a taste, both theory and practice, of the pedagogies that we've been working on, and specifically in the domain of the sacred. Jake and I both have been working on creating sanctity in different domains. And so I wanted to offer things that we can do in theory and practice to enter into our Zoom space and to really sanctify our Zoom space. And we'll do that, I have just 4 minutes, but we'll do that in a few different steps. One, by offering some framing questions, and I'm sharing my screen now so that we can share these questions together. Sharing some framing questions for sacred space, for this Zoom space, sharing and anchoring a Judaic anchor for our learning today, and then we'll offer a practice together to sanctify together. So I wanted to just open with some questions about our physical environment, since this is a non-physical environment, but we'll just glide through the questions to give you a taste. To what extent do our physical environments influence our intellectual and spiritual lives? And is it something that we as individuals and as a community think about regularly? Is it something over which we have control? What are we to do when we're stuck with less than ideal spaces, limitations, and constraints? To what extent do our physical environments shape and influence our discourse, our identities, our communities, and our families? Who's charged with making decisions about individual and communal use of space? Does there exist room for meaningful input? As we shift more and more to permanent online spaces, how do we apply theories and conceptions of sacred space and sacred ideas really to these new platforms? And finally, how are we different people in different places? And I want to move, this is a way for us to frame our space and our sacred text informing our pedagogies today, all of us, in terms of practice emanating from the sacred texts. And Jake and I will talk about this more during our breakout session. But when we think about defining the sacred, I want to draw on Jake's beautiful rendering of the poem, because I think it really hits upon two elements. There's an addition and there's a taking away. There is kind of putting something into the conversation, and there's a removal. And when we think about what makes something sacred in Jewish thought, what makes something kadosh, there are really two different elements. There's that positive, we can say, connecting something to a transcendent purpose, actively pulling something into our conversation. And then there's the second dimension of it, which comes from a different angle. When we say that something's sacred, it's something that can't be instrumentalized. It can't be utilized for any purpose other than the purpose for which we deem it to be sacred, not to be utilized for any utilitarian purposes. And when we think about the text and anchoring our conversation today in Jewish text, and specifically, I'll focus on the second angle or the second dimension of the sacred, thinking about elements of restriction. And there's a discussion, a lengthy discussion in the Talmud. I'm just giving you a very short opening into it. And where the Talmud is talking about a Beit Midrash, a study hall. And it says, Lo ya'asenu kapandaria. You can't make a study hall into a shortcut between two different thoroughfares. If it's designated to be something that is sacred for a particular purpose, it can't be instrumentalized. It can't be utilized for any different purposes. And I think this gets to the heart of what is sacred in all of our domains. Right? Something that is kadosh can't be used for a purpose other than the express purpose for which it's deemed sacred. And in the concept of Kiddusha, of sacredness, of holiness, has at its core that giving up of dominion over something and creating boundaries for limitation. So I wanted to take a moment with that particular angle in mind and allow us to sanctify our sacred Zoom space for 30 seconds together before we hear from a variety of different pedagogies, but specifically to be together and sanctify this space together. And I invite everyone to utilize those two different components. Momentarily, if you would like, shut off your camera, you don't need to, but to kind of create the space, look around your space and kind of integrate both the insertion of something particular and the removal of something particular. Close any unnecessary computer tabs that are open. Look around your space and remove physical items that might be of distraction on one end. And on the other, integrate a sense of holiness into our space, adding something to our space, whether it be, we're in limited constraints now, but an object, a book, or a learning tool to keep close by so that we have both dimensions of that which is removed and that which is taken in order to sanctify our space. And as we turn our cameras on, if you have shut your cameras off, I invite everyone to maybe, just drop in the chat in this short time that we have so that we can see as we move to the next section, what did you remove and what did you bring in order to collectively sanctify this space together today? It's a delight to be able to sanctify together with you and for us to be learning together. And I know the day is a hectic one for many people with different back to school dimensions. So really grateful for everyone for being here as we sanctify together. So sharing back to Molly. Thank you.
So the next part is we're going to share a little bit about the framework and the journey that the Jewish Pedagogies Circle has taken. And I give it over to Shuki Taylor.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us. My name is Shuki. I'm talking to you from Jerusalem, where I work at Inner Squared, the Institute for Experiential Jewish Education, along with a fabulous group of people, most of whom are here. When you came into the room tonight, there was a song on. The song was playing a verse that says, Tam ha'etz ketam ha'pri, that the flavor of the flavor of the tree should be as the flavor of the fruit itself. This is taken from one of the first verses in the Torah, when there's a description of the creation of the world. And when God creates the world, he says that there should be an etz pri, that there should be a tree, that the tree is the fruit itself. But what landed up happening in creation was that it wasn't an etz pri. It was not a tree that is a fruit itself, but a tree that creates fruit. There was a distinction, became a distinction. Part of the sin in the Garden of Eden created this situation where the flavor, the tree and the fruit became separated. The means and the ends became separated. They were not one and the same. Rav Kook describes a process of our redemption in the world is to work towards the idea that the flavor of the fruit is as sweet as the flavor of the tree, that the flavor of the tree is as sweet as the flavor of the fruit, that they're one and the same. We live in a world that has brokenness because one of the things that we live for is always an aspiration, a result. We work towards goals so that we can achieve, so that we can accomplish. We measure ourselves against effectiveness and efficacy. We live in paradigms of impact, and many of these results are worthwhile and they're noble. Yet the paradigm of means and ends is ever, ever present. One of the things that we're speaking about here is not an either or. It's not having a means or an end, but about ensuring that the means are as worthwhile, noble, and purposeful as the ends themselves, that the tree is as sweet as the fruit. The tools are not just instruments. They're part of what we do and part of who we are. When we think of the words Jewish education, I often wonder which is the noun and which is the adjective. We often think that Jewish education is a means to educate about things Jewish. Jewish education is to educate about Jewish ideas, Jewish history, Jewish texts, Jewish values. The goal of the project of which we are here to celebrate was to consider Jewish as the adjective and education as the noun. What about our education is Jewish? What is an act of education and of educating that is inherently Jewish within itself? Not education for the purpose of Jewish, but Jewish education, education that is Jewish. And what might change if educators deepen their educational practice, their methods and pedagogies, and view them, their actual acts, what it is that they're doing, as performance of inherently Jewish acts. The way that we teach is a Jewish act. The methods and the approaches that we take are inherently Jewish. What would happen if the tree is as sweet as the fruit? This is what our 12 Jewish pedagogies fellows sought to discover. One of the things that we aim to do, that we look to do in this program, is to be able to gather a group of exceptional thinkers and practitioners that would create and think about and explore and discover approaches to education, Jewish pedagogies that were inherently Jewish acts. They gathered as a chabura every 2 weeks, learned, presented, explored, discovered, gave each other feedback, considered new worldviews, developed practices, all with the goal of creating ways of educating, of aligning how we teach with what it is that we teach, to make sure that those are coming together. There are a number of exceptional people who made this possible. The team at M Squared and the research team that created the concepts driving what Jewish pedagogies are, which we'll discover and explore later on. The team who put this together, Molly and Emily, who worked tirelessly and creatively and rigorously to be able to make this project happen. The supporters of the project, the Jim Joseph Foundation, the Lippmann Camp Foundation, who enabled an incredible spirit of experimentation for us to try new things, discover new things, and finally, the fellows themselves, who searched, critiqued, changed, discovered, tested, explored, and created one of the things that you will see in front of you, not only the presentations we're hearing today, but research papers that are available for you to read, educational resources for each of these pedagogies that you yourselves can go and practice, and the incredible presentations that we'll be hearing here today. So I want to thank everyone for being here. I want you to thank you for being a part of this incredible opportunity to think differently about Jewish education as a concept, as an idea, and as practices, and to celebrate this time here with you. Thank you.
So without further ado, you're going to be able to hear from the participants themselves. As you can see, we have 3 breakout rooms available to you, which you will be able to self-select. Each breakout room will last for 30 minutes, and the format is just a conversation between the 2 participants on a theme of commonality that they shared in their pedagogy. So each one very interesting conversation, but the first one is on love. How can we cultivate a stance of love? And then creating sanctity, expanding the notion of what is sacred, and integration, feeling moved by texts that become a part of us. So if anyone speaks to you in particular, feel free to go ahead and go to your toolbar, which is in the lower half of the screen, click breakout rooms, and select the room that you would like to join, and we will meet back here in 30 minutes. Feel free to stay on and let me know if you have any questions.
How do I do breakout?
We don't have access to breakouts.
Oh, now you do. Thank you. There you go. And I'll be hanging out in the main room if you want to switch at any point or anything like that.
Emily, can you assign me to love, please? I can't
Me
seem
too.
to assign myself.
I don't know how to. Yes, one moment.
I have a feeling co-hosts can't assign themselves anywhere.
Yeah, I have the same problem. I can't do it.
Okay. One moment.
Yeah, I can't seem to join our room.
If you go next to on the breakout room list, for each one, you can see where there says the number. If you hover over that, it turns into join.
Oh, yeah.
Do y'all
I
see
don't have a list.
Yep.
The iPads tend to be different in everything, and this seems to be another one of those things. I can't hover, I can't find it anywhere on my iPad.
Right.
To get into a breakout room.
So who's speaking? Let me.
Randy Brown.
Which one would you like to join, Randy?
Integration.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you.
Emily, you need to put me into love because I have to facilitate.
That's right, you do. There you go. Leah.
Emily, for me it says breakout rooms in progress for some reason.
Yeah, I have the same one.
Yeah.
Marta with the same problem.
Let me get the fellows.
I'll also start helping. Who needs to go where? Marta, where do you need to go?
Love to Adam and Lisa.
Great.
Thank you.
Next, Yoshi, where do you need to go?
And me, Lawrence Snitcher. I think I'm speaking to a fellow South African, Shuki.
Yes, you are. Yes, you
But I
are.
hear an Australian twang.
My wife's Australian.
Shuki,
Yeah.
Arna, can you
where
put
we
me in
go?
integration?
So I'm also on my iPad because I'm actually on a Melton. I'm just
Yes.
and I've got
So where do
the
you need to get
webinar
to?
going on in the background. So I'm on an iPad for this, and there's no option, no number, no.
So tell me,
nothing.
Lauren, where do you need to go?
Integration.
Okay.
Okay.
Next. I also want to go to integration.
Yes, I'll add you. And if anyone else wants to put in the chat where you want to go, that'll help you move it along. Thank you. Sorry
this
about
is B. I'm in the chat. I don't know if you saw mine.
Okay. Jeremy, I see sanctity.
Did you see mine, B. Berman, Beatrice?
Beatrice.
Where do you want to go, Beatrice?
Love.
Okay, I've got
Sending you to love.
Linda Wolf, Sanctity.
Linda Wolf, sanctity.
Yes, thank you.
I think I did send you there, Linda. You just need to
Shrash, where do you want to go?
I just need to
Creating, please.
Sorry.
Oh, creating Sentity.
Okay, Samantha, I see you. Rena, I see you. Elise, I see you. Eliza, where would you like to go? Sanctity, I see you. Esther Andron, where would you like to go?
Not there. Who else?
Okay. Rose Ross, where would you like to go? Or Steve Shervin or Susan Yammer? I believe y'all are the. Linda, I see you.
I'm not in Sanctity though.
Right, you're not. So I have sent you, I've assigned it. Okay, how about this? If you go to your toolbar at the bottom, do you see where it says breakout?
Right.
So you should see something that says accept, because I've invited you to a room.
There's no.
Welcome back. Welcome. We'll give everyone a moment to return. I hope those were some illuminating conversations and you got a chance to hear from some of the fellows. And now I am going to hand it over to Yoshi, who's going to lead us in a quick exercise.
Hello. Thanks so much, Emily. Thanks. I was just in the session with Shira and Jake, and thank you so much for leading that. I'm actually going to build from Shira's invitation earlier when we were all together to be thinking about creating sacred space and to be thinking about this space that we're in, both on the Zoom and the physical spaces that we're in, because we have to remember, like, we may be flat, two-dimensional squares on the Zoom, but behind those squares is a cube, right? We all exist in physical space in 3 dimensions, even if sometimes with all the time spent on Zoom, it feels like we can kind of forget that. So we're going to sort of think about being in sacred space and now build on that to think of how do we settle our bodies in space and how do we move through and respond to the space and the place that we're in and the spaces that we're in, what's happening inside those spaces, what's going on with our different learners and participants. So there are sort of 2 dimensions to my pedagogy. The first is makom kavua, which refers traditionally to a sort of fixed space. And I use that to talk about the ways in which we position ourselves through a prescribed manner. So how do we prearrange the space? And then I also talk about makom nora, which is emergent positionality. So how do we respond to things that are happening in the moment? So we're going to build and play with both of those things. So the first one is I want to help us just reorient to the spaces that we're in. If you're anything like me, you've been spending way more time in whatever physical space you're sitting in, way more time over the last 18 months than you used to before. It's become really, really, really a fixed makom kavua, but we can sort of reorient to the space, and of course we change over time, right? So our relationship is not always exactly the same to this same space. So let's take a step out of the Zoom space, and I want to invite us to sort of return to what we were doing with Shira, to look all around the space, to really orient and to actually like look around, right? Like move your head, move your eyes, look all around. Notice the qualities of the space. Notice what's here, what's not here. What colors and textures and patterns do you see? What's the light? What surfaces? Where are the windows and doors? Where it's light's coming in? Notice just as you look around and reorient to this space, like, do you feel anything in your body? If you look at the window, do you feel anything differently? Maybe some excitement or some energizing or concern, right? What happens when you look at the ground? Do a little just like twist so we can look all the way behind us, and then go to the other side. This one just kind of feels nice through the spine and back and hips, but also just allows us to really look and see like what's in this entire space around us, right? So again, just sort of check back in with the body. Just notice, like, does anything feel different? It might not, right? But for me, when I do that orientation, it sort of helps to just settle my body into this space. So finally, and if you have me on speaker view, switch to gallery view now. And the final part of orienting to the space is back into this virtual Zoom space, right? And just look, right? Everyone who has their cameras on, and if you don't, invite you to turn it on now, just click through. And for everyone who has their cameras on, or there's a photo of somebody, let's just look at the faces that are in here. There's a lot of folks who might not be able to look at literally every single person, but try to look around, pause on people's faces, give a little wave. Hey, everybody. Right, so we exist in this space together, right? In this sort of preset, gallery of boxes that we're all in together. So that's Makom Kavua, right? And then sort of, there's some, some obvious limitations with the Zoom, but a lot that we can play with. I want to now move into this space of Makom Nora, which is this emergent response. So we're all having this moment together, right? We're all in this space, virtual space, and all in this time together. So I want to give us a place and a way to mark it. So I'm going to play a little music. This is a nigun from Nava Tehila. It's called Into the West. This one's been in my head for like at least a year. It keeps on coming back to it. But it's really, it's appropriate because we can think about what I think of as the Jewish cosmological relationship to ourselves and to time and to place. So right now, at least if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, sorry, Simon, we're moving from summer, right, into fall. And so if we think about how the seasons then also align with the directions, this is sort of, summer is considered the south, it's the heat, and the fall is into the west. So we're moving from the south into the west. We're also in the end of the month of Elul, which is, depending on which new year you're using, it's either the 11th month or the 6th month. So it's the sort of 6th month if you start at Passover. So it's sort of like the Friday of the months, right? And we can think of that sort of Ma'ariv service we do Friday evening. So we're moving into the west. We're also in the 6th year of the Shemitah cycle, about to move into Shemitah. So we have all of these ways in which we're sort of moving into the west part of these different cycles. So I'm just going to play this. I'm going to invite you to go ahead and actually stand up if you feel comfortable, or you can stay in your chair. But we'll take about 60 seconds to move around your space. As I play this nigun, walk around, get up high, get up low, turn around, use all of your senses as I play this nigun. Here we go. Y'all are not moving in your space. Yum, I can see you. Yum, feeling really good to stand up, so you can stay standing. If you were ready to be like, okay, Yoshi, that was enough moving, I want to sit, you can sit. And if you're still sitting, you can stay. I want you to return to that object that Shira invited us to bring into the space. And if you weren't quite with us yet, you can just look around and find an interesting, notable object to grab. And if you have that object, go ahead and pick it up. Turn it around, observe it, turn it, turn it again. Just look, what's interesting about this thing? It might already be special, it might be totally mundane, it might just be like a random pen. That's fine. And now I want you to place that object back in your space, but now place it into the west. You might need to pause for a moment and be like, wait, which way is west? Right? So east is where the sun rises, west is where the sun sets. So that might help you orient a little bit. So put that object into the west. This is helping to orient ourselves in our spaces and into this broader sense of place and ecology. And these objects that are now in the West in each of our spaces now hold this additional sacred purpose of meaning, of memory and connection. So you can keep that object there for the rest of the symposium. You can return it after symposium, or you can just keep it there if you're like, actually, this feels really good. I have this ZZ plant. Oh my, you can't really see it because of the weird background, but I have this ZZ plant that's right here on my desk. It feels really good. It's kind of blocking half my monitor, but that's okay because I don't need to see my monitor right now. So with that, I'm gonna return to the Nigun once more, invite you if you wanna sing with me, if you wanna move around again, if you just wanna like stare at this nice object that's sitting here into the West, and just think about what does it feel like in our spaces and in our bodies to be moving into the West of Elul, moving into the West of the 6th year of the Shemitah cycle, as we sing a little and then come back together. Yum, ba-dai, dai, 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 yum, ba-dai, dai, 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 yum, ba-dai, dai, 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 dai. Yum, ba-dai, dai, 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 yum, ba-dai, dai, 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 yum, ba-dai, dai, 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 dai. Ay, 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 yum, ba-dai, dai, 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 dai. Ay, 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 yum, ba-dai, dai, 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 dai. Ay, 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 yum, ba-dai, dai, 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 dai. Ay, dum, ba-dai, dai, 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 dai. Thanks, Mitchell.
Thank you, Yoshi. So this group of fellows that you're meeting here now, and as Emily put in the chat box before, you can read all of their research papers and also discover their resources on the link that she sent. We convened them about 12 months ago to start through this process of researching and creating Jewish pedagogies. Now, to be able to work and develop Jewish pedagogies, we needed to have a definition of what makes for a Jewish pedagogy. So now I'm going to go another year back, 2 years ago. 2 years ago, 1 year before launching the fellowship, we spent a year in research, along with some brilliant thinkers and scholars exploring this very question. What would make for a Jewish pedagogy? Where do we even start? Now, I want to already now kind of just put out that the definition that we came up with is certainly arguable and certainly debatable. But what we were looking for was a container that is strong enough to be able to hold some sort of body of work. What is a pedagogy? Many, many definitions for what a pedagogy is. But the definition that we worked with, at least, is that a pedagogy is comprised of an educational practice that is reflective of an educational worldview, meaning it's different to a method, a pedagogy. It's not just a way of doing something, a certain type of practice, but that practice itself that is here to serve education is reflective in and within of itself of an educational worldview. We have a certain way of understanding the world around us, a certain understanding, educational understanding of the world, and that understanding is driving a specific educational practice. The practice itself is educational, the worldview is educational, and so we asked what makes for a Jewish pedagogy. This we defined as an educational practice, which is reflective of an educational worldview that starts and develops from within Jewish tradition. What would it mean for a pedagogy to start and be developed from within the Jewish tradition? Here we kind of try to create a sandbox container with using and accessing the benefits of creative limitation. We suggested 4 qualifiers, 4 qualifiers that would make up what does it mean to have a pedagogy that starts and is developed from within Jewish tradition. Number 1 is that the pedagogy must stem from a Jewish ritual, custom, or mitzvah, which is pervasive in Jewish tradition and is educational in nature, meaning the pedagogy needs to start from within a Jewish act, that Jewish act is pervasive and recognizable and is inherently concerned with education. And part of in the links that you will find, you'll also have a copy of our research paper itself. These qualifiers, the work the fellows needed to do, are certainly arguable, they're certainly defendable, but we're looking for a framework that felt both thorough, authentic, and at the same time gives enough space for interpretation, creativity, and possibility. One that is enough, not too much, not too little. It's rooted, it's expansive, it's grounded in ideas, but is all ready for imagination. Now, I said that we had 4 qualifiers, but I only listed 3 of them. The last one came with profound and organization. In our research, we didn't pay enough attention to one Mishnah. This Mishnah is a Mishnah that appears in Pirkei Avot, and its entire the entire Mishnah is concerned with ways of acquiring Torah. It's called the Mishnah of Kinyanei Torah, acquisition of Torah, and it lists 48 different ways by which Torah can be acquired. One could argue that those are a list of 48 different types of pedagogies. And so we recognize that we can't ignore the presence of such a profound and ancient text, one that has so much relevance to who we are and that at its core is a list of Jewish pedagogies. And so we said that a qualifier is that the pedagogies that our fellows develop, aside for stemming from a custom, mitzvah, or ritual, and that is pervasive in Jewish tradition, and that is educational in nature, it needs to be in conversation with the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot. Some of the examples of the Mishnah, by the way, are extremely profound. How do we acquire Torah? When someone is noseh be'ol im chavero, helps his carry their burden. When we share in burden, we can acquire Torah. Omer davar b'shem omro. When someone says something in the name of whom they heard it from, recognizing that we are not our own creators, but we are always in relationship with each other and learning from each other. How do we acquire Torah? Hasameach b'chenko, someone who is happy, satisfied, content with what it is that they are dealt with in life. There are amazing different lists of ways in which we are able to acquire Torah. I would like at this point to introduce Alyssa Masur-Benowitz, who's a friend and colleague, and we've worked together closely on many different types of things. While we were doing this work, Alyssa, who is the executive director of Kol Ha'ot, an organization that's dedicated to art and education, was engaged in her own project, also exploring this Mishnah, 48 different ways of acquiring Torah, and very similarly to the work that we were doing, through the mindset of limitation and possibility, restraint and creativity, masoret and chidush, newness and tradition, the power of interpretation to make ideas relevant. And what I want to do now is do a little bit of a detour and invite Alyssa to explain this incredibly innovative and creative project that she and she was working with were working on around this very idea of acquisition of Torah, ways of learning Torah, and to demonstrate the expansiveness of some of the ideas that we're presenting here. She'll also share with us about her project, but she'll also lead us through learning of this Mishnah. And really together we'll be able to have an exploration and encounter with texts and ideas that were a very prevalent part of our fellowship. And I invite her now to share that with you to take us deeper into this really beautiful text. Alyssa, please.
Thank you so much, Shuki. Can everyone hear me? Making sure. So yes, my name is Belisa. I'm in Jerusalem, in Kol Ha'ot. Our organization is dedicated to Jewish education through the arts. And really it is quite interesting that sort of parallel to this project going on, we found ourselves this winter at around January. Israel was entering its third, I think I'm losing track already, lockdown for COVID. And we had this beautiful, gorgeous studio space that hadn't been full and lively with usually we have our workshops taking place and our artists and residents coming from abroad, etc. And the space was empty. And yet we felt that there must be something creative that could be done, even given all of the constraints that COVID presented for us. And the project we came up with, I'm going to share my screen. Just give me 1 second to make sure I get sound as well. Okay, can you see? Okay, so the project we came up with, what we called 48 Creative Quarantine. And the idea was to invite 48 artists to come, each of them to spend 48 hours in our studio and explore one of the 48 Kinyanei Torah, one of the 48 pieces in this list of the Mishnah that Shuki referred to, of how one acquires Torah. And I'll just start by saying that a very basic tenet of our way of working and our belief is that, I'll say two things. One, that constraints create and enable creativity. So by creating, and this refers to a lot of the things that people have spoken about up till now, we created a space, a makom, that was constrained. You had to be in this space for 48 hours. People were allowed to leave to go to sleep, but not everyone did. And so there was a constraint of space. There was a constraint of time. You had 48 hours. You had to come in the morning at the beginning of your 48 hours and start your project. And you went in knowing that when you left 48 hours later, you had to have something to show. And then the third constraint was of content. And each artist chose or was given, depending on their pleasure, one of the 48 pieces on the list. And I was in Chana, in Rachel's group before, and Chana, who taught about Chazaras, said, let the text be the light force. She said frequently in Jewish education, or especially in experiential Jewish education, we tack it on at the end. So in our case, the light force was this Mishnah. We started with this text, and that is what drove the content. And the people who came were artists from many different disciplines, different parts of Israeli society, secular, religious, ultra-Orthodox, but each of them came to explore one of these. And as I'll share a little bit with you, you'll see that they really explored them in very different ways and very personal ways. So this is our list, the Mishnah that Emily showed before. Here we have it in Hebrew, and here it is in English, and we'll get back to it when we begin our learning. But I want to just share a few examples of work that people did out of the 48. We were actually stunned, especially given Corona. We ended up having 250 applications for the 48 spots. And people were given a 2-day slot. They had to commit to those 2 days. We couldn't play around with it. I'll also just mention, because of the midah, the kinyan of giving credit to the Bahomed Davar B'Shem Omro, that Eli Kaplan-Waldman was the artistic director of this program, and he did a fabulous job. So I'm just going to share a few pieces that some of our artists did. And this one is Eino Sameach Behora'ah. And it's translated here as who does not delight in their teaching. Although the word hora'ah could be also translated as giving judgment. And you'll see that with many of these, it was up to the person to interpret it, to understand the words the way they understood them. So just as Jewish text is, we always have the opportunity to make our own interpretation. So Mar is an art teacher in a junior high, and she said that she, at that point in the year, in the middle of the year, had been teaching on Zoom, teaching art on Zoom for the entire year. And she said, I don't delight in it anymore. It's really getting hard. At first, I found ways to be creative and it was a challenge, etc. But she missed the personal interaction. She missed the ability to be with her students. And she said she felt like she was in a desert, as you can see, that she was not enjoying she was not delighting in her teaching. What I'm not going to do now is then take it to the next step, which we could all, of course, do, is like, why is this something that we need in order to acquire Torah, right? Like, do we need to have had that experience of not delighting in our teaching in order to be better educators or to be better learners? So we're not going to go there. I'll leave that as the thought question for you all. This piece was by Michelle Brint, and she had number 43, Mityashev Libo B'Talmudo, which we translated as who composes their heart at study. But the word Mityashev has to do with sitting and being in space. And it also has to do with the heart. And so she created this three-dimensional piece. The picture doesn't do it justice because it is three-dimensional, of all of her. She's actually a student at Pardes this year, was this past year, and she was sitting with her heart in study and then gave that a physical visual representation. Matan Khan is a comic artist, and he chose Eno Machzik Tova Le'atzmo, someone who does not take credit for themselves. It's also interesting to know, we'll get to this when we get to the Mishnah, that the things in the list do not all follow the same type of wording, or some of them are more like traits, and some of them are characteristics, and some of them are behaviors, and it's a little hard to categorize them. But Matan was very taken with this idea, and what he tried to show in this comic strip is actually some of like a rabbi who has a lot of honor and respect and followers, who actually notices a simple person doing a chesed, doing a kind deed for somebody else, and goes over to them and kisses their hand and bows down to them and says, you are the one that should have all this following and all this credit, because you are actually the leader here. You are the one who deserves the credit, not me. And that was his take on it. This piece is another three-dimensional piece by Devorah Reutenberg-Harash. She actually wove this talit during her 48 hours from scratch in our studio. She literally worked for 45 hours. She slept for 3 hours. And Devorah's piece was Be'ema, by awe. And she writes in her artist statement that she wanted to create something that people would walk under and around and lift up their head physically and bend back their neck, and have that sort of physical sensation of awe. And when you're under it, you can see there are, it's hard to see here in the picture, but there's Jewish text from Tefillin woven, and the straps of Tefillin woven into the talit, with this idea of connecting ourselves to the call to be our Jewish selves, and how she explains it as just a physical manifestation of awe. And it reminds her also, by hanging this way, of a chuppah, of a wedding canopy, and that sense of coming into tradition and bringing in new, but also continuing the old. So as you can see, some of them interpreted the kinyan however they felt, they were looking at it from a more studious point of view, and some of them came from a very, very personal perspective. So this one was Shlomit Naim Naol. She's a poet, and she wrote a few poems, but this one, and it's really tiny, I know you can't see it, and it's in Hebrew, but I'll read you just some pieces of it. And the opening is, to recover from cancer, you acquire in 48 ways. And she had gone through that process over the last year, and she went one by one with each one of them and gave it her own interpretation. So if the first one is Talmud in learning, so she said in learning the disease, B'shmiata Ozen, in listening, to listen to what is good for me, to the Binat Halev, the wisdom of the heart, to know how to let go, etc. And she just goes through every single piece of the Mishnah and interprets it in how it related to her process of healing and recovering from her cancer. Another very personal one is by Lenore Mizrahi Cohen, and hers was Mekirat Makomo, someone who recognizes their place. And again, the image doesn't do it justice. This is a woven 3D piece, and those like colorful pieces that you can't really see that are woven amongst the black strings are very fine paper calligraphy of letters in Hebrew and Arabic. And she talks about her identity as a Syrian Jew, and how this is essentially her DNA. It's a strand of her DNA and her identity of who she is, and knowing her place, where she came from, what brought her to where she is, and how we're all intertwined. While we each have our place and our history and our own identity, we are also intertwined together in a joint tapestry. This one is by Hedy Abramowitz, and she did the one that Shuki mentioned before of sharing in the bearing of a burden. And Hedy decided to approach this from a female perspective and to look at the two societies she's involved in, and one, the American and the Israeli. So on the left, the bottom two images, it's a physical box, are female soldiers in the IDF carrying a wounded fellow soldier on a stretcher, and how they're like physically, literally carrying the burden of their fellow, but also symbolically carrying the burden of their responsibility of protecting the country and serving in the army, etc. And on the flip side, she wanted to honor Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her sharing the burden of fighting for women's rights, and also on the Supreme Court, sort of not relinquishing her seat because of the burden that she felt that she had to do for her colleagues. And Hedy uses this piece as a way to look at how these two societies and the women in both societies are sharing and in the burden, and what similarities and differences there are. I'm just going to quickly share. Well, this one is I don't even know if you can. We'll try to share the sound. This one was music, and this was Eran Levy. Hasameach B'Choko. I'm gonna skip it just because we're short on time and I want to get to the learning piece. And I'll finish with this one by Rona Spieler. She's an acrobat and dancer, and she chose by a minimum of chatter. And she chose to explore, I'm not going to show you the whole piece, but how one can
I love you in a quiet way,
or
a very subtle way, every day. But it's all so innocent, so innocent. And I won't tell you anymore, but I think you know. 'Cause it's all you asked me for, you asked me for. But how is it that you are mine?
I'm going to stop here. So those were just maybe 6 or 7 examples from the project. And I'd now like to just take a few minutes for us to learn this Mishnah together. I think, as Shuki mentioned before, it's important to have limitations and qualifiers. Which qualifiers we choose might be a little bit arguable or random, but there's something fascinating about this Mishnah. And I'm not going to go into it from a like academic point of view, but more from a just a sort of naked reading of the text. I'm going, Emily, could you put the Hebrew English version back up, please? We have it, both of them in front of us. Thank you. So what I'm going to do, we'll do it for our purposes now in English, because I think that's the common language. I want to point out 2 things. One is the way that the Mishnah opens. Okay, so it starts with a little bit of a strange opening. It says, greater is learning Torah than the priesthood, than kehuna, and then royalty, umina malchut. For royalty is acquired by 30 stages, and the priesthood by 24, but the Torah by 48 things. So this seems a little odd. First of all, both the priesthood and the royalty, their numbers of the way they are acquired are based on other Mishnayot, to other lists we have in other places. And there's this sort of like very like quantitative thing, like they must be better because they have more ways of acquiring them. Like it's just a number game. But if you think about it, first of all, it's interesting. Why would Torah be compared here to melucha and kehuna, to priesthood and royalty? Like, what does that? What is that? What is the connection between these 3? If anyone has any thoughts on that, I'd be very delighted if you could put them in the chat, because to me, it's not a very obvious connection that we would be comparing these 3 things. Any ideas? Authority. Thank you, Aviva. And Yoshi says, it's going really fast. Legitimizing rabbinic Judaism in a post-temple society. Exactly. So it seems that we're talking about Torah here in the sense perhaps of leadership. It's not just about knowledge or learning, but it's who are going to be the people that are going to be the leaders, that will have the authority, that will be able to move us ahead. And like that, this idea that this list is actually not just about learning or acquiring Torah or education or pedagogy, but it might actually be about who is the deserved leader and what are the qualities or the experiences that one needs in order to be a good leader, is, I think, a very interesting take. So I'm going to now just read them slowly. And Emily, if you can be with us and switch when we get to the right place. I want everyone to just listen for a minute. And while you're listening, maybe start thinking, are there categories within this list that you could divide of things that seem similar to each other, or different ways of organizing the list? The Torah by 48 things: by study, attentive listening, proper speech, by an understanding heart, by an intelligent heart, by awe, by fear, by humility, by joy, by attending to the sages, by critical give and take with friends, by fine argumentation with disciples, by clear thinking, by study of scripture, by study of Mishnah, by a minimum of sleep, by a minimum of chatter, by a minimum of pleasure, by a minimum of frivolity, by a minimum of preoccupation with worldly manners, by long suffering, by generosity, by faith in the stages, by acceptance of suffering. Learning of Torah is also acquired by one who recognizes his place, who rejoins in her portion, who makes offense about her words, who takes no credit for himself, who is loved, who loves God, who loves her fellow creatures, who loves righteous ways, who loves reproof, who loves uprightness, who keeps herself far from honors, who does not let his heart become swelled on account of his learning, who does not delight in giving legal decisions, who shares in the bearing of a burden with his colleague, who judges with the scales weighted in his favor, who leads him on to truth, who leads him on to peace, who composes himself at his study, who asks and answers, who listens to others and himself, adds to his knowledge, who learns in order to teach, who learns in order to practice, who makes his teacher wiser, who is exact in what she has learned, and who says a thing in the name of the one who said it. Thus you have learned, everyone who says a thing in the name of one who said it brings deliverance into the world. As it is said, and Esther told the king in Mordechai's name. That's an example of the last one. I'm going to ask Emily to stop sharing screen for a second and ask all of you briefly to do a little quick exercise and just jot down, if you're willing, if you're brave and willing to do it on the chat, that would be great. If not, just jot it down for yourself. How many of these 48 can you remember? Which are the ones that stuck out in your head? So I'm out of time, but I think it's a really interesting exercise to see what it says about us, which ones we remembered, which ones spoke to us. There's some people here in the chat who remembered sort of groupings, like the heart ones, as Molly said. And of course, we could spend a lot more time on this, but thank you for having me. And I'm going to pass the microphone back over to Molly. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that beautiful presentation. We're going to move ahead into our next set of breakout rooms. And I foresee that some of us had issues getting on because I know that our computers are set up differently. And so I went ahead and I made a screenshot of the button that you press when it's time to join. I'm putting it in the chat right now. And as last time, I'll be happy to stay on and help anyone join a room. But these are our 3 new options. Again, another 30 minutes in the same style that it was last time. Visibility with Yoshi and Ari, in dialogue with Marta and Jar, and impressing with Simon and Leah. I encourage you to definitely stick around and join. I'm going to open up the rooms now. And those of you who are having trouble accessing a room, a tip is that if you go to breakout rooms and then you see the title, like Visibility, Yoshi and Ari Weiss, there is a number to the right of that title. Hover over it and press join. It's not intuitive at all. So I understand why we had trouble getting there. So stick around if you're still having trouble. Otherwise, we'll see you in 30 minutes.
Emily, for some reason, I don't have that option.
Hi, please, can you put me in dialogue? It's Lauren Snitcher.
Sure. Lauren, one moment. And
me, Marta, doing it.
Marta, 1 minute. Sorry.
And me, Beatrice.
1 moment.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can you put me, Rick Konkoff, in dialogue?
Okay. Rick.
Yes.
in dialogue.
Yeah.
Got it.
Beatrice also.
Beatrice, you like to go in dialogue?
Yes, please.
All right. If y'all want to add in the chat anywhere else that you'd like to go, I can take care of that. Okay, Erica, I see you. Seems that you got, okay, Diane, I see you. You want visibility. So Erica, I see you. You want impressing. Meredith, I see you impressing. Steve, one moment. In dialogue. Who's left? If you, okay, Lauren, I see you too. We'll add you to in dialogue. Is anyone else left who would like me to put you in a room if you're having trouble accessing it? Meredith, are you good? You're good? Okay, great. What about you, Randy? Vivian, Eli, Ellie, Seymour.
Actually, I guess, can you say that once more? What's you hover over what exactly?
So I can also totally add you to a room, but if you go to, if you press breakouts, and then you see like the title, like visibility or in dialogue, if you go to the right, there's a number and you'll hover over that number. It's pretty weird. Thank you. Okay, is everyone else taken care of? Welcome back. We'll let it give a second for folks to come back. Okay, so we'll just move right on ahead. I hope that that was, I'm sure that was a great conversation that you all just left, and I wish we had more time. But now Rabbi Rachel Bovitz is going to talk to us about her pedagogy of Siyum. Take it away, Rachel.
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. As I spoke about in my project and my paper, actually, Siyum is really not meant for a one-time, even a one-time very special session like we're having together today. So we're going to do a little bit of a hybrid, which is that you're going to, most of you who are not one of the Pedagogies Fellows are going to be celebrating our fellows and their Siyum. This is actually our second Siyum, and we had many, many more sessions than just 3, so we definitely earned it. So I'm really happy that we're all going to be able to celebrate together, and there'll be some components. This is a very short, but will be components that are for everybody and components that my colleagues will share with you. So in my pedagogy, I basically identified 3 major elements for Siyum, which you'll see here on the slide. One is an important component is celebration, and we're going to do a little celebrating. Actually, I would say that we've been celebrating all the way through today. The second is integration, some way of really integrating the learning that's happened in the sessions that has preceded the Siyum. And then finally, a launch, some way of really denoting that this is not the end, but just a new beginning. To me, that was actually one of the motivating factors in creating the Siyum, was really to make sure that learners have that experience of launching into their next learning endeavor. So, as I said, we've really been celebrating all the way through. I talk about in my project some ways that you could celebrate is through all kinds of arts, poetry, music. We've had a chance to hear all of that. We also really, and this was a surprise, at least for me, I think for my colleagues in the Pedagogies group, we had a surprise of Alyssa's presentation and really a whole different angle on something that we've learned together. And our group had studied that text quite a lot, and so to really be able to see it from a new angle was really a celebration of our learning as well. But I wanted to share with you one other celebratory aspect today, and that is here on my screen. Hopefully you can see it. is the work that was done by the virtual scribe, Joshua Knowles. And here you see him illustrating, cartooning the very beginning of our session with Shuki and Molly, really introducing what this whole pedagogies initiative was all about. References to Jake's session, to Shira, and the things that she expressed. So this is like, and again, another way of celebrating, and actually there's going to be even a more full representation of this that you'll get a chance to see afterwards. And now I want to take that down, sorry. Okay, somehow I'm not doing that. Emily, can you take it down for me, or do I somehow my takedown? Oh, stop share. It's like hidden. Sorry, I only share all the time, but it was hiding from me. Next, I wanted you all to participate with my colleagues and really hear them talk about the integration of their learning in our program. And so in advance of the session, they're not all coming up with these on the spot. I asked my colleagues to think about either a haiku or a six-word memoir that integrates their experience, either of the whole sort of pedagogies project, or specifically about the work that they did on their particular pedagogy. So I'm going to call on a number of my colleagues that participated to share with you what they came up with. I'm going to start with Lisa.
Okay, great big idea. Make accessible to all with love and with awe.
Terrific. Marta. Oh, Marta, you have to unmute. We can't hear you. Try again.
Okay, here I am. The wisdom revealed by conflict shines.
Wonderful. If you've heard her presentation, you'll know what that's all about. Shira, please.
This is the haiku. I'm crafting the sacred in spaces far, wide, and vast makes me feel at home.
Simon.
To think anew about text of yore.
Thank you, Hannah.
Relate, respond, relinquish, review, revamp, repeat.
Thanks, Jake.
Hey, life contracts itself into an essay, then unfurls as a class.
Wonderful. Jar.
Learning how to teach, diving in the deep end of the pool, Jewish play, and more.
Thank you. And finally, Yoshi.
Collected pedagogues, crafting pedagogies, creating purpose.
Thank you. And I'll share my haiku. I think I got the syllables right. Make the how Jewish in worldview through practices, pedagogies, l'chaim. So thank you, and to all, those on the screen, and to everyone who is in our cohort, really for such a meaningful experience. I think the integration came from really getting to work with one another and the wonderful teachers in the program, and each of us gaining so much individually and as a group. So finally, for the launch, for everybody here, everyone who's in attendance, in addition to the Pedagogy Fellows, I'm putting a question in the chat and would love you to answer in the chat. What about today really has inspired you to want to learn more, to want to read and look at the projects that you're getting in the links, or to do some inquiry on your own? What inspired you? What do you want to explore further? So we'll let everybody think for a minute and put that in the chat, and I'll just let everybody read that on their own. Thank you.
Wow.
Hey, Molly.
Hi, Adam. I was reading, I got caught up in the messages. They're really beautiful, and we're so excited for you to play and use those. Hi, Adam. It's really nice to have this few moments with you on lessons learned and moving forward. And in a similar format, I just have some questions that I'm going to ask Adam, and we'll just do a little back and forth. So Adam, firstly, who are you? What was your pedagogy by name and, worldview? A bit about it, just for the people who missed it.
No problem. So I'm Adam Aylott. I am the head of school at Ronald C. Warnick Jewish Day School, which is in Foster City, California. It's an elementary school and a middle school. And the pedagogy that I wrote was called Lesha, which stands for Lemidah Shegoret Ahava, which means learning that leads to love. And it was about cultivating love as a way of arriving at a more complete learning outcome in a Jewish communal context.
So Adam, what, as being a part of this fellowship, what are some themes that's emerged for you or some lessons that you've learned?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So I think, one of the, maybe it's basic, but one of the big lessons that I walk away with is how much every fellow is craving the space. We were all really sucked up by the day-to-day of our organizations, our individual work, and just that space, regular 2 hour and a half sessions to step away from our daily work and think deeply was one of the big themes that I walked away with. And I think that the other piece is that it just comes back, and I'm just going to end this answer with what Shuki started with, which is this idea of the Etz and the Pri, and that I think all humans, all organizations, a core desire and a core experience is to make their insides match their outsides. And I think when we call ourselves Jewish educators, wanting to actually feel like our work is deeply Jewish, not only in content but also in form, that really stood out to me. How about you, Molly? What were some of the big themes that you took away from this experience?
So in the opening to our research paper, which you will all read, all 150 pages of course, over Chag, we talk about some of the themes that have emerged, and it seems like there is just such a craving for like love and visibility and whole person and the embracing of the whole person. And that just seems to be something that really came out and stood out of everybody's pedagogy. It's not just content, but it has to be more. It has to be content for the sake of something else. And that was a beautiful and unexpected thing that emerged. We really didn't know. And I think it is timely. Of course, we can't get rid of the context that we're in at the moment, but I do think that it's beyond that. So I'm interested, to see also how these pedagogies will evolve as our context evolves as well. Yeah. And then with your Lesha, which I love, I'm like a real fan of your pedagogy. I have a big crush on it. And I think that all people should be as amazingly privileged to have you as a principal. Ari said in his last session something really beautiful. He said, what would happen if we took it seriously, right? It's not just about a nice to have, oh, this pedagogy is really sweet, but it's what would actually happen if you took this pedagogy seriously? What is a change that you would see in your school? What would it look like? How would students be interacting with one another? And so I really want to know if Lesha is fully lived and practiced, what would it look like?
Thank you. And so much of what I'll share is informed by my colleagues in this cohort. I just love the idea. I think one thing that really, and this is not my first rodeo with M squared, one thing that really stands out with M squared, and this came out both with the work that Kiva did with us and Shuki and so many of the awesome team members that joined us, is just thinking really holistically about how every single detail can be imbued with meaning. So one of the things that I've been thinking about, and this is partially informed by my chavruta Shira, is not only thinking about how teachers are structured, like as my comfort zone is thinking, helping educators lesson plan and thinking about like, how do you use your 60 minutes, most effectively? And when Shira was talking to me about her work in sacred spaces, she was reflecting, Shira, I hope this isn't weird, about her own home and working with an architect. She sort of took over a home that needed some work many years ago when she moved to the place that she currently lives. And so I've actually been thinking about, I've started to work with an architect as well at my school, thinking about how spaces can cultivate love between different learners, how classroom setups, how common spaces. Our school talks so much about community and cultivating love between different students and parents and teachers and students, but how can actual spaces be structured for that? And I think I think the other thing that I'm really thinking about going forward is we did a really cool activity, Molly. I think this was your idea. We had a poet or a translator of poetry come, and one activity we did that I found really meaningful was we were put in groups, in diverse groups, and we were asked to translate a Hebrew translation of Kafka into English. And it was just really fascinating hearing the ways in which, even in our own internal group and the ways in which the other groups all translated this Hebrew passage so differently. And I think the work of translating what we know to be true internally and what we feel and what we've discovered into a broader context is really fascinating and important. And one of the things that I'm thinking about is how do I translate this idea of cultivating love between learners as a way of getting at a more complete understanding of learning into objects, into routines in the classroom, into curriculum, into books, into things that we take for granted, like whiteboards and markers, et cetera. Yeah. I'm ranting a little bit. Molly, what are some things that you're thinking about going forward? I'm curious. As a facilitator of this project.
Well, this was a real, this was like such a beautiful inaugural cohort. And we only had 10 months, which sounds like a lot of time, but is not a lot of time at all when you're like trying to experiment and develop. And like, we had incredible people like Orit Kent and Allison who do pedagogies of partnership come and teach us about their pedagogies. We had Rabbi David Jaffe, right? These are people's life work that they have been engaged in. And we just went through this really immersive, incredible 10-month process. But, I'm curious also how like we can support in the post-development of all this, right? Like right now is the culmination, but like this isn't ending, right? So what does phase 2 look like of these pedagogies? What does it mean to actually like observe time and time again so that we could notice the changes and how people are really being impacted by these pedagogies? And overall, just we thank God, like luckily Littman Camphor, thank God, is going to be giving us money to run this again. And so, thinking about all of the experiences, how do we build on them and keep growing as this project keeps growing and evolving. So just to end this piece, Adam, this was a question you threw in there, and I feel a little embarrassed to ask it because it feels a little promotional, but I'm going to do it anyways. What was different about this fellowship than other ones that you have been involved in?
I didn't realize that was promotional. Well, I do want to say one of the things, following up on what you just said, Molly, I think one of the things that M Squared has really figured out is how to not try to be everything at once at the same time. And every step of the way, we were given a lot of definition and boundaries about what was expected of us in terms of outcomes. And I think that's a real lesson to be learned. And I think that every single one of the fellows could continue. You said, what would the next step be if there was another process of applying for additional grants to develop, resources, to develop more spaces, to develop like. There would 100%, with the definition that M Squared, provides and the real boundaries, there would 100% be an opportunity to create useful resources I'm seeing from his question in the chat, useful resources for educators to not feel so overwhelmed taking these big lofty ideas and translate them into their classrooms or their educational settings. I'll just say one of the other things that I really thought was unique about our cohort is, as an educator in a day school, very often the settings that I'm in are exclusively day school context or exclusively executive director contexts. They're not as diverse as ours are, and it's really helpful to zoom out and get at the 50,000 foot level and hear from someone who works with in a Hillel, or works to support Hillels, or works on their own drama initiative, or works in adult education. There were such unique and different voices, and in the spirit of trying to distill what a Jewish pedagogy is, it's helpful to not say, well, I'm a school educator or I'm a synagogue educator, to say I'm a Jewish educator. And first, let's figure out what the pedagogy is. First, let's figure out what our worldview is. And then let's, go down to our discrete, domain. I think that's actually the right thing to do, as opposed to say, well, I'm a classroom teacher, let me learn like understanding by design, or let me learn lesson planning, and then let me, retroactively go and figure out how to make this Jewish. So I really appreciated the diversity in our group, because it helped us focus on the common denominator, which was that we're all Jewish educators and trying to be better Jewish educators.
Thanks, Adam. And I'll just say that, I really found this year, while everything was so out of balance, for this to be an anchor, like for every other week to have this, even though it was hard, even though it came sometimes at bad times, it was just such an anchor, and it was such a blessing to be able to see all of you on the screen and be able to have these conversations in such a loving and also, a challenging way. And so thank you to everybody for your time and your presence. I pass it over to Lisa.
Hi. So I'm Rabbi Lisa Goldstein. I'm in New York City, and the pedagogy that I worked on is that of brachot, of spontaneous blessings, to be done at the end of an educational session. And I think for two reasons. I think one is that sort of in a big level, like this great big idea, is that a blessing gives us the opportunity to cultivate our own capacity for love, for a true sense of concern and caring about the people that we are connecting with in this educational setting, and of yirah, like this sense of our own smallness and our own limitations, that we're sort of channeling this goodness that we wish for people, and also knowing what we can and can't do in affecting that wish. And also, in that context, a blessing can facilitate better emotional, soulful integration of the content of a session at the end of an educational context. So I'd like to lead us through the process of creating these spontaneous blessings. So first, I would like to invite you to reflect back over the day, over this symposium, and think about a moment that you found inspiring or interesting. So it could have been in the sanctification of the space that we did at the beginning. It could have been this whole idea of tasting the tree and the fruit. It could have been something that you heard in one of the breakout rooms, one of the pedagogies that you found inspiring. It could be in this whole idea of a makom kavua, makom nora, really finding our place. It could be in thinking about what is Jewish pedagogy and all the different ways that the Mishnah and the art might inspire us. It might be in the practice of siyum, or in really thinking about the lessons learned. So to take a moment, one thing that just, the takeaway, something that you found interesting. Big or small, doesn't matter. And now what I'd like to invite you to do is to maybe we can take down the slide so we can just see each other, put us on gallery view so that we can see each other's faces. And take a moment to go inside and to see if you can connect to a felt sense of affection and care for the people that you see on the screen. either particularly or generally, all of us engaged in this process of Jewish education in one way or another, and see, like, what does it feel to connect in with your real sense of care and desire for their well-being? And now I'd like to ask you to fill in this sentence, and you can put it in the chat. May we all be blessed with. From that place of really caring about each other, may we all be blessed with good health, shalom, curiosity, joy, the ability to continually inspire, space and time to think deeply, inspired pedagogies that meet our age, inner peace, love, harmony, the desire to dig deep, ask questions, collaborations, chavruto, to support and challenge us, the search for truth, moments of quiet. It's coming so fast, I can't read them all, but you can read them all. And what I would like to do is really bless us with continued inspiration to give the love that we have for our people, for our tradition, for our God, for our world, and to be able to communicate that so that we can choose life in this year that's about to begin. Can you hear that song?
Can you hear that song?
And
Thank you, Lisa. So thank you for joining us today. Erev Rosh Hashanah. I don't know how many, I have to go back. And if you liked what you saw today, we are recruiting for another round of Jewish Pedagogy Circle. Stay tuned. Applications will go live in the end of October. M Squared is actually tomorrow starting a month of Shemitah. We will be closed from September 2nd till October 4th. Simon, yeah. Well, I know we're going to keep this going. This is not the end. I do just want to say that we are really gifting you with the research papers and the resources. We will be doing additional trainings in how to use the resources. There's a lot of materials there, but as you can see, they're beautiful. They are user-friendly. They help you enact the pedagogies and really bring them to life. We encourage you to experiment, to explore, to play, to mess up, to create new, whatever it is, but these are for you as a way to take these pedagogies seriously. And thank you very, very much for joining us today. And Yoshi, I turn to you to play us off.
Thanks so much, Molly. Thank you, everyone. For like, I don't know, another minute or two. If you need to hop, we understand. If you're just like chilling and enjoying, then we're gonna keep going. Yum, ba-dai, dai, 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 yum, ba-dai, dai, 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 yum, ba-dai, dai, 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 dai. Yum, ba-dai, dai, 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 yum, ba-dai, dai, 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 yum, ba-dai, dai, 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 dai. Yum, ba-da, da, da, da.
Shana Tova, everyone. Thank you.